We're going to talk a little bit about some of the principles of art. Now we're going to get a little bit into the how we do things, how we create a work of art. So we know the elements: line, shape, color, form, texture, value, and space. That is what is in every work of art. Every work does not have all of these, but every work has some of them. Now, what do we do with the elements of art? That's where the principles come in. We can balance them. We can have a focal point. We can have unity. We can have variation. We can create rhythm. We can create movement. We can use repetition. So you can think of the elements of art as the ingredients and the principles of art as the recipe, what we do with those ingredients. If you look here, which elements of art do we see? We see color. We see shape. We see line. We see value. That's all well and good. So let's think about the principles of art now. We're going to look at 4: balance, repetition, unity, and then variation. I like to say variation, but contrast, variation are very similar. And unity and harmony can be words that can be used interchangeably. So balance is a visual balance. So the work of art doesn't look like one side is heavier than the other. So something that is smaller but farther from the center will have as much weight as something that is large but close to the center. So this is called, the one on here, how is this balanced? The orange of the house is balanced by what? The orange of that field in the background and the sky. We have 2 large trees balanced by 9 smaller trees. Right? You're kind of balanced. How about this sun as a very heavy thing? Right? Compared to this whole hill. This little sun balances kind of the whole hill. So it's just a feeling you have. If it's not obviously unbalanced, then it's probably balanced. This is called asymmetrical balance. So everything's not exactly the same. This is symmetrical. This is obviously balanced. Everything is exactly the same. Now this is certainly not balanced. All the weight is on one side. A work of art doesn't have to be balanced. It doesn't have to be balanced. So we're going to talk about repetition. Now repetition is repeating an element within that work of art. And we use repetition to create balance. We can use repetition to create movement. We can use repetition to create unity or harmony. We can repeat things. When we repeat things, we don't have to repeat them exactly the same. And that's critical because we can add variation. So, what elements are repeated? Color is repeated. Lines are repeated. Shapes are repeated. But are they repeated exactly the same? The colors are pretty much the same, but they're different shapes. They're in different positions. So they're repeated, but with some variation. And that's how we keep it interesting. If the colors are repeated exactly the same size and exactly the same shape, it might not be very interesting to look at. Repetition also creates movement because our brain clicks on the things that are the same. Red here, red here, red here. It keeps the eye moving around the painting. You don't get stuck in one spot. You don't necessarily, you might have a focal point, but you also want to have movement. You don't want to have one spot that's too dominant in the composition. So this is very complex. Is it balanced? Does your eye get stuck in one spot, or does it move around the composition? I would say it moves around the composition. We do have this large black, red, purple circle that's pretty strong, but we also have little circles moving our eye around. We have lines leading us around. We have this whole mess on the right-hand side that's pretty strong. There's great movement here. Is this more unified or more varied is something to think about. I would say it's more varied. Lots of different colors, lots of different shapes and lines. It's pretty wild, isn't it? Unity or harmony. It's when a work of art feels together or whole. Repetition creates unity to your people. So this feels very unified because it's all rectangles. It's just a few colors. The lines are pretty similar. So this is unified by shape. The background unifies it. Even the colors are all pastel, aren't they? So your work should be somewhat unified so it's together, but there has to be some variation or it's boring, right? So the colors have changed. Shapes aren't exactly the same. They're very similar. This has a strong sense of unity. It feels very together. It's mostly rectangles. There's some variation of size. There's variation of color. Now, something like this, I intentionally put this in here because I think most people are just going to be like, what is this? How do I appreciate something like this? I think it's so cool because he used the weirdest thing, but it works. It works. Like, how did he make that work? He repeated these squigglies, but he did it in different ways. It's really dense in one spot. It's lighter in another spot. And it's orange and large. That's just wild. That's crazy that he did that. But it's unified because he did repeat the squigglies. They all have a connection. You have this little rectangle over here, a rectangle over here, a rectangle over here, and they're all squiggly. To me, this is fascinating. I think it's bold. I understand if you don't feel that way. It took me a long time to appreciate work like this. Alright, so that's what we're focusing on right now. As we're going through abstraction, balance, repetition, unity, or you can say harmony, and then variation or contrast, right? Things that are different. And how they all work together. That's the thing about the principles. You can't talk about one without bringing others in there. They're all connected. So, this will be a little confusing at first, but just we'll work through it. We'll have lots of practice. And ultimately, you're going to choose one of your abstract compositions, and you're going to have to explain the composition. Talk about balance. Talk about repetition. How did you unify it? Is there enough variation to make it interesting? Okay, you'll get good at this. You will. So even if it's hard right away, that's okay. We do our best every time. We get a little better. We understand a little more.